Moving on to September, 4 wins, 2 draws and 1 loss. Another screamer from Conway helped us beat Bridlington before back-to-back draws and we had to get to Clipstone and Armthorpe. Looking at the Clipstone away game, one of the goals of the season again was Josh Green, his last-minute equaliser there. To do what he did, and the time he did it in the last minute was astonishing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think... I mean, if you go back to the Bridlington game, Adam Baker scored 2 corkers in that game. Very, very identical goals.
Cut in top
cutting
corner,
off the sort of right-hand side, left-footed, both of them curled them both into the top corner. And then obviously Josh popped up at Clipstone, which sort of set the theme for the rest of the season. I think, late goals have figured in so many of our games, but we'd always set out to make sure that the team was fit enough to play. And I've gone on record time and time again this season to say that, if you're going to beat us, you need to play us for 96 minutes. You don't turn up and play us for 50 and then say we nearly won. The teams that have beat us have done it for 96 minutes, and fair play to the ones that have done that. So, yeah, the Clipstone one was brilliant by Josh because there was a lot of panic in the ranks and, we were throwing everything forward and he just stepped away from it. He stepped out of it. It dropped to him. Once it dropped to him, he did his little shimmy and his little step over. It was a brilliant finish and it set us up for the season.
In mid-September we signed the Supporters Player of the Season, Jason Maiko, our very own N'Golo Kante, if you like, of Leicester. How much of an impact did he have across the season, Maiko?
Well, Jason was my captain last season, so I knew a lot about Jason. I knew what he was capable of, I knew what he'd bring to the side. I think we'd identified that we had some really, really good ball players in the middle of the park, but what we didn't have was someone who could go and rat about and win it back for us, and we knew Jace had that in his locker and he's very, very good at it. His energy levels are phenomenal. If you look at the last 2 weeks of the season when he put a shift in 8-9 games on the bounce and never ever stopped. So in terms of it was never a risk bringing Jason to the club. It was a really, really easy decision once it became available.
2 good victories against Liversedge and Pontefract were followed by 2 7-goal thrillers swinging both ways. First we beat Rainworth 4-3 at home, but then we lost at Barton 4-3, as well as missing a late penalty in that game. Were you somewhat thinking at times that we would simply score more than the opposition?
It was interesting because people talked about that, and I said at the time there's no way we're becoming the entertainers of the league. It was really, really important that we shut up shop, and I think that kind of happened a little bit later on. I think signing of Greg Anderson assisted in that, because I think if you look at our clean sheets, I think 15 or 16 across the course of the season, most of them come after Greg had come in initially with Efi, and then when Efi got injured, obviously with Milner. So it was something that we were aware of and we'd picked up on really, really early. I thought the Rainworth game, they were one of the best footballing sides that came to the eye-to-eye at that time. It was a little bit easier when we went there, but that was a brilliant victory for us. And then disappointingly, really, to go to Barton and get beat like we did, especially because for the first 7 minutes we could have been 3-0 up, and that had changed the outcome of the game completely. I mean, we really came out the traps really quickly. And then we lost our way a little bit, and it's times like that you start looking and identifying and working out the shape of the team and what direction you need to go, and that was probably one of the turning points in the season.
Moving on to October, Pickering at home to be late now, wasn't it? On the Friday night evening, 579 people were at the Eye-to-Eye Stadium that evening. We were 4-0 up inside the first 35 minutes, which was remarkable, wasn't it? It was an amazing game.
Well, there was a lot of emotions attached to the game.
A lot of build-up
for everyone apart from me. I've always said I've never got bogged down in the fact that people say to me now, well, you've never beat Cleethorpes. I don't care. It's just another game in a calendar of fixtures, and I knew there was a lot of interest in the game. It was switched to a Friday night, which I thought was a brilliant idea for both clubs involved, and perhaps as having seen the size of the crowd that came through the turnstile, that's maybe something clubs should think about, because it gives people the weekends free, especially after they've worked hard all week. So no, it was brilliant, and we come out the blocks and we raced out, and I think it was Jace Michael's first start that night, and so we kind of knew that we'd have enough in the middle of the park, and like you say, to come in at half time with 4 goals was phenomenal, because it was over as a contest. And it was an important hurdle, because a lot of the players that had been at the football club were either at Pickering. Obviously the the connections between the two clubs with Paul being up there. I mean, the rivalry. There's never been a rivalry between me and Paul. I've known him a long time, and he's a very, very good friend. And I've got a lot of admiration for him. He's won the league himself. He's been in the FA Cup second round. So in terms of rivalry, there's no real rivalry between the management other than what other people made of it. And to win that game on that night in that style was a real turning point in the season for us.
Late goals certainly weren't a rarity because as we'll cover more, obviously. Retford away was another one. Josh Green popped up in the last minute again to take all 3 points. It was a game we had a vast number of chances, but the final table just proves how important all these late goals were.
It was an interesting game, the Retford away. I think that probably the first time we came across a pitch that was probably not in the greatest condition, and what they did very, very well was they come out and they rattled us from the first minute, and they stopped us from playing, they stopped us from getting any rhythm in our game. Interestingly enough, it was Connor's uncle Chris, were manager, and I know Chris from a couple of courses I've done with him, and so I knew it was going to be a tough encounter, but when I think we had enough chances to win the game 5 or 6-0, it was just unfortunate that none of them had gone in, and again, after doing it at Clipston, Josh Green then again pops up in the right place at the right time, and when it drops to him in the penalty area like that there's only ever going to be one outcome.
The first big game of the season was probably Worksop away in October. A 2-1 win for us in the end, but that was another brilliant result, wasn't it?
I think when you look at certainly the record against top 6 clubs across the course of any season, what tends to happen is the team that obviously go on and do well in the league tends to be the team that turns the other teams around them over. So I knew that was quite an important factor in it. We built up a reputation of doing that when I was at Railway. We beat Salford Omen away last year and competed with all the top 6 or 7 teams within the league. So I think with the top team, certainly with Worksop, we had an idea of how they were going to play, we knew how they set up, we knew what their game plan was, and then it was just a case of countering that game plan. And when you're playing against the top sides, it tends to be like that. Anyone who plays us, we have a certain way of playing. The problem we have against us is we've got it from all angles and all avenues, and if one person's not doing it, someone else does. So very, very difficult to counter. So we knew if we could go to Worksop and get a result, it would be a massive statement of intent.
November started with another big result and a big match against a promotion chasing team. A 4-1 win at Handsworth, Paramount, at Sandy Lane as well, of course. Were we starting to set the marker down for the league at this point, do you think?
I think what we'd worked out by then was we're quite keen on certainly the statistical side of the game, which hence is what Laurel does for us. So, and Heafy had worked out that the number of points we were picking up at the time was enough that if we could maintain it across the course of the season, that we would be there or thereabouts. We'd already identified by then that we would. I think we'd said 94 to 97 points would win it, and we finished with 98. And I think we'd said about 2.39 points per game would win it, and I think we ended up with 2.33. So in terms of where we are and where we were at that stage, I mean that was another massive. That was Greg Anderson's first game as well,
it was,
and we'd only signed him on the Thursday or the Friday. I think me and Matthew went to meet him. In Sainsbury's. He did dead posh, Greg. And it were a battle because he'd had all these shoulder problems and he was worried about his future career. He's a gardener and a very good one, owns his own business, does really, really well out of it, and he had some really, really fair points in terms of obviously going forward that if he couldn't operate his machinery, he couldn't do his job. So convincing him to take the chance was really, really difficult. But I chased Greg before. I spoke to him early last season when I was at Railway and tried to get him to come there, and he chose to go to Clitheroe because he's really good friends with Simon Gardner over at Clitheroe, who played with him a number of times throughout his career, and I think Greg was Simon's best man. I think Simon's going to be Greg's best man. So it didn't quite get him, but I think he came in that game, and Handsworth game at the time was about diags into the wide men knockdowns, and I think Greg come in and did so well for us, but another person who did well that day was Dan Clayton, because they targeted Dan, and within the first minute he'd come right over the top of his winger, and he took everything, him, the ball, the whole lot, and then he tried again, he did exactly the same again, and that sort of set the tone for the performance. And then Greening got his 2 and Baker got his 2, and it's a brilliant result for the way that.